Hikers often say Mount Arjuno is beautiful, but dangerous in ways maps can't explain. Trails vanish into the fog, compasses spin without reason, and sometimes entire villages appear where none should exist. 5 friends thought those stories were just old superstitions, but the mountain was waiting for them. And once they stepped into its hidden shadows, only 4 would ever come back. John, Danny, Robert, Ken, and Edward decided to climb Mount Arjuno, a mountain renowned for its natural beauty, but also for its mystical tales. They often hiked together, but this time their journey would take them to a place they never imagined. Their journey began smoothly. The sky was clear, the breeze was cool, and the mountain atmosphere was serene. However, as the sun began to set and the fog began to descend rapidly, the atmosphere changed. They lost track of the previously clear hiking trail. "We need to find a place to spend the night quickly," said John, who was leading the group. However, the more they tried to find the trail, the thicker the fog grew. The sounds of nature began to fade, leaving only the sound of their footsteps echoing in the still air. After walking for a while, they saw something ahead. It was an isolated and ancient village. Small wooden buildings stood among the large trees. A faint yellow light emanated from the gaps between the houses, as if there was life within them. The village seemed peaceful, but something felt wrong. It was too quiet, too still. "Why is there a village here? I don't remember there being a village near the Arjuno hiking trail," asked Danny, looking worried. However, fatigue and the desire to find shelter led them to enter the village. They hoped to meet a resident who might be able to give them directions, or at least a place to spend the night. As they walked into the village, the temperature grew colder, even though there was no wind. They tried knocking on the door of one of the houses, but there was no answer. John opened the door slowly, but the house seemed empty. There was no sign of life, just old, dusty furniture, as if it hadn't been touched in years. "This is strange," Robert whispered. "It feels like we're being watched." Ken, who had been feeling uneasy, suddenly saw something through the window of the house. At the end of the street, he saw the shadow of an old woman standing still, staring at them motionlessly. "Ken, what do you see?" Edward asked, seeing Ken's stunned expression. "Someone's there," Ken replied quietly, his voice trembling. When Edward and the others turned around, the figure was gone. However, the cold was getting more and more intense. Danny, beginning to sense something strange, decided to find a way out. "We have to get out of here. This isn't right." They immediately started toward the path they had come down, but strangely, it was no longer there. The village, which had once seemed small, now seemed to expand and twist. Every corner felt similar, leaving them disoriented. Every time they tried to walk out, they returned to the same point, the center of the village. Fear began to creep over them. There were no sounds of nocturnal animals, no wind, only an increasingly oppressive silence. Amidst the confusion, they heard the sound of a small bell tinkling in the distance. The sound seemed to be inviting them to come. "No, we can't follow that voice," Robert cried, beginning to panic. But John, feeling he had no other choice, decided to follow the voice, hoping it would lead them to the exit. They followed the ringing of the bell, deeper into the unfamiliar village. At the end of the village, they came across a large building, grander than the other houses, as if it were the center of the village. "This is probably the village head's house," John said cautiously. But in front of the door, an old man sat on a wooden chair, dressed in traditional Javanese attire. His eyes were blank, but his smile was wide, revealing worn teeth. In a hoarse voice, he said, "You're lost, aren't you? This village isn't a place for the likes of you." "What do you mean, sir?" John asked, trying to remain calm even as the hairs on the back of his neck stood on end. "You've entered a village you shouldn't have entered. No one can leave here without paying a price," the man replied with a soft laugh. Ken, who had been feeling uneasy from the start, sensed something was wrong. He wanted to run, but his body felt stiff. The bell rang again, louder this time, accompanied by whispers that seemed to come from the ground. Suddenly, the door to the mansion swung open by itself. From within, a strong wind swept out, carrying the air of death. In the eerie silence, the old man said again, "Someone must stay." "What do you mean?" Edward shouted, his voice filled with anxiety. "For every soul that enters, one must remain as a new resident," the man replied, looking at them with a meaningful gaze. Instantly, Danny screamed and ran away, trying to escape that cursed place. The others followed behind him, but strangely, Danny was never seen again. The four of them continued running through the thick fog until they finally found themselves outside the ghostly village. However, when they turned around, there was no sign of the village. The fog cleared, and only the forest trees remained. They knew Danny had disappeared, becoming part of the village, a sacrifice the ghostly village needed so that others could leave. After that incident, they never spoke of the climb again, but deep in their hearts, they felt a deep sense of guilt for the loss of a friend. They knew Danny was still there.